This is my final episode talking about bicycle maintenance. And this episode, as promised, I'm going to be taking apart my bottom bracket. I'm doing this because research that I've done says that I've way exceeded the life of my bottom bracket. The typical life of a bottom bracket, according to what I found, is at 5,000 miles, and I have over 20,000 miles on mine. I also did a group post on Facebook a couple of months ago bragging about my 20,000 miles and also about the fact that I have a lot of stock equipment on my bike, one of those things being the bottom bracket. So I got some skepticism and some feedback that maybe that wasn't such a great thing. So I've decided to take it apart, and I'm motivated to take it apart and see what I can find to determine whether or not this bottom bracket is really still in good shape. Now, for your own purposes, you need to do some research to figure out what kind of a bottom bracket you have. I have a Shimano sealed bearing bottom bracket cartridge with tapered square axles. There are all kinds of besides the square axles, there are also splined axles. There are, besides the cartridge type, there are also press-in type bottom brackets, and there are also pack bearings, older type pack bearing bottom brackets. So before you tear into yours, be sure you know what kind of bottom bracket you have. I found out what I have by looking at my spec sheet, the spec sheet for my bike the year that it was built. Now, checking the bottom bracket. Over the years, what I've done to check the bottom bracket is I've spun the cranks, and I got a pretty good feeling that I had smooth motion. And I also, when the bike was on the ground, what I would do is take the cranks and move them and try to move them laterally to see if I could feel any end play. So both those things turned out negative for me. I really never found a problem. I have no end play, and as you can see, I have fairly smooth motion in the cranks when I spin them. So taking it apart at this point in time is the only way I'm going to satisfy myself that I need to replace the bottom bracket or that this one is still good. Of course, you're going to need some more tools. Now, through the course of these videos, I've identified a number of tools that you might be able to use to maintain your bike, and none of them are expensive as long as you purchase tools that fit your specific bike. Now, for this task, what I'll need is a wrench to remove the pedals, because it's a lot easier to pull the cranks when the pedals are off. I'll be using a crank puller, and whether you have splined axles on your bottom bracket or square tapered ones, you will need a crank puller to remove the cranks. And then finally, for my specific type of bottom bracket, I have this socket, this spline socket that I will use to unscrew the bottom bracket from the frame. I've done the first step. I've removed the pedals and I removed the chain. Now, you don't necessarily need to remove the chain when you service your bottom bracket. I removed mine because it was time to replace anyway. But if you check out videos on how to service your specific bottom bracket, they'll show you ways to service it without removing the chain. By the way, I'm doing this thing, you're seeing it as I'm doing it. I haven't taken this apart and then reassembled it ahead of time to make sure things were going to work out the way I wanted them to work out. This is the first time I've been into it, and you're going to see it happen as I do it. The one thing that I checked out after I removed the chain and pedals is I spun the cranks, and as you can see, they spin very freely. I also checked for side play again without the chain on, and I find that it's very tight and there's no end play at all. So I'm concerned that this is kind of wasted exercise and that I'm servicing a bottom bracket that is perfectly good, but we'll find out. My plan is to take the cranks off and disassemble the whole thing and see for myself what the bottom bracket looks like. I successfully removed the cranks, and I'm thankful for a lot of good YouTube videos that showed me how to do that, because I've never really done this before. What I've confirmed is that my bottom bracket does need to be replaced. When I rotate the axle of the bottom bracket by hand, I can feel some resistance, and I can also hear kind of a metal-on-metal rubbing sound coming from the bottom bracket. I compared that with the new bottom bracket, and the new bottom bracket doesn't do that. This also says to me that the right way to test the bottom bracket is to remove the cranks. When you simply rotate the cranks on the bike, you get a misleading sense that the bottom bracket is fine, because again, the mass of those cranks makes it very easy to spin, even though there's some resistance in the bottom bracket. So I'm ready to replace my bottom bracket. So this is the bottom bracket I removed from my bike, and it is a UN55, a Shimano UN55. This is the new bottom bracket, the Shimano UN300. The key measurements for my type of bottom bracket are the thread diameter, which in this case is 68 millimeters, and the axle width, which in this case is 118 millimeters. I probably could have used the old bottom bracket for another couple of thousand miles, but there's no really good way to anticipate the failure modes that could happen, so I'm happy to replace the bottom bracket. My next step will be to clean the threads in the frame, install a new bottom bracket, and put everything back together. I hope this helps. Thank you for watching.